Welcome to Hidden Conversations. Hidden Conversations is coordinated by WVIK and hosted by Dr. LaDrina Wilson, a leadership and diversity expert and founder of IMAN Consulting. These conversations are designed to delve into many of the most difficult issues of race and equity facing the Quad Cities today. Many of these issues we hear about every day on the national news, but then are left unaware when they occur to our own friends and neighbors. We hope that by hearing firsthand stories and statistics from experts based right here in the Quad Cities, we can break down the myth that these things only happen somewhere else, and in so doing, increase our empathy for those who literally live right next door. Thank you for joining us this evening. Here's Dr. LaDrina Wilson.
Good evening. I'm so glad to have another opportunity to spend time with you all and talk about important issues that impact our community. As you know, this evening we're going to be chatting about criminal justice issues. And, I just wanted to really reflect on what it means, what justice means, and put things in a personal context. In this community, about 10 years ago, I decided I needed some new furniture, and my girlfriend was over my house and she decided she was going to go check out the furniture with me, and not wanting to leave all the kiddos at home with my husband. It was probably like a Friday night. I know it was January. It was cold out. Went and heated my car up and took my little one with me. I think my little one would have been about 2 at the time. So, and as we walk out to my car, we were met by individuals who were armed with guns. And my girlfriend was walking ahead of me, and I just saw her kind of crouch down like this. And when you are put in these types of situations, your very primal instincts kick in. And so, of course, that fight or flight instinct had to kick in. And I've always thought of myself, in all honesty, as like a fighter. I'm like, if there's a challenge, I'm going to take it on. I'm going to go to bat. I'm going to fight, right? That's kind of how I thought of myself. But in that situation, I very quickly realized that flight was my instinct. So I took probably 2, maybe 3 Olympic strides. I mean, that was probably the fastest I've ever run. And for those of you who know me, who know I ran track in this community, went on to run Division I track. I was a sprinter. I'm pretty fast. That was probably my fastest moment. And before I could even think of what I had done, I realized my baby. So my friend was walking in front of me. I see her crouched down. My little one had to be really low, and I had already taken 3 steps the other direction. So I turned back around to grab my child, and it was met with a man that was there with a mask on his face and a gun in my face. And at the time, I just remember holding my hands up like this and say, take whatever you want, take whatever you want. My car is running, take whatever you want. My purse is in the car. Please just don't hurt my baby. Don't hurt my baby. And I remember distinctively him saying to me, give me all your, some cuss words in there. Give me all your stuff. And I said, you can just have whatever, take whatever you want. Just don't hurt my baby. Don't hurt my baby. And he said, give me that stuff right there. And I realized I had in my hands DVDs. This is how long ago that was. I had DVDs in my hand, P90X, like workout videos or something. And so, of course, naturally, I gave that up very quickly and without hesitation or reservation, tried to give him directions on how to best operate my vehicle. Just take whatever you want. I just didn't want my child to be hurt. I had my family in my home. I didn't want my home to be invaded. I didn't want my friend to get hurt. And as this transpired, it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. And after they left, they did not take my vehicle, but they ran off. It was 4 of them. And then, of course, just my friend, my daughter, and I. And after they left, I just remember feeling so scared. I was more scared after they were gone than I was in that moment when it happened. And so you may ask, why am I sharing this story as we talk about criminal justice? I'm still very impacted by that experience. Property can be replaced. A sense of peace is hard to find when it's been taken from you. That night I was robbed of my sense of peace in my own backyard. And I share that story because even as a victim, I can still acknowledge that there is something that is fundamentally flawed throughout our criminal justice system. Oftentimes, people expect that the consequence, that punishment is what justice is. And I realized in that circumstance and situation when I had to go and look at a lineup of individuals, not knowing whether the individual who approached me with a weapon in his hand pointed at my forehead was a Hispanic male or a light-skinned Black male. I didn't know. I had no idea. I couldn't make an identification. All I knew is that that person was still out there. And I knew in that moment when I looked at the lineup, it would have been incredibly satisfying to be able to say that right there, that's him. Because then I would maybe have a sense of safety or security knowing that that person was off the streets and could not hurt me and could not hurt anyone else. But I knew that I couldn't do that. And I felt an intense sense of obligation for the safety of other people to be able to do that. But I knew I couldn't, in good conscience, just point out someone who kind of looked like the person I thought I saw. But even in all of this, I know that justice should be far more than just punishment. And oftentimes that's what our criminal justice system is focused on, is simply on punishment and consequence. And while I do think that we are all accountable for consequences, I think that rehabilitation is what's just and fair for our community, not just those that are committing crimes or accused of committing crimes. You see, we are a community, good, bad, and ugly. We all have to live in this same space together. And so to be a part of a system that simply punishes people is not good enough for me. That is not justice. And so that's why this topic is really important to me, among other reasons. But I have a wonderful group of individuals who are closer to the work than I am, who are going to share their perspective, their experiences, and hopefully shed some light on some of the issues that are happening here in our community. So tonight, we are going to have a chat. I believe that Tracy White will be joining us, if you want to bring her in. And I realize that Gary Mayfield, both good friends of mine, will be joining the conversation. We have one additional panelist who will be joining us shortly. Okay, are we having some technical issues, Jeff?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Absolutely. Okay, we're good now.
Absolutely.
We'll let it ride as long as we can, but just pop in and out as you need to. So I will let you guys kind of your own introductions, because you guys each have a very unique and interesting perspective, a very eclectic background, but also really unique ways that you're tied to these issues. So with that, I think if it's okay with you, while we have Jeff, just in case we lose him, I'll start with you, Jeff, and then we'll kind of work our way around. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how or why the issue of criminal justice is important.
Absolutely. My name is Jeff Wallace, obviously, and I'm raised in the Quad Cities. And, before I get into a little bit more about, why this is important to me, I'll sort of describe a little bit more about who I am and where I come from. So I've been involved in the criminal justice system first as a youth, which since the age around 12. Eventually, I went on to, I would say, be raised by the criminal justice system until I was actually waived to adult court, and where I would spend about 6 years in prison, 4 years in solitary confinement. And at some point in time, I got out, and I was determined that after taking so much, I needed to give a lot back. So since then, I created the Vision Leadership and Productions organization, where I do just that. And that's pretty much it. I went on to further my education, received a master's, and just every chance I get, I'm looking at trying to redeem who I was so I can look forward to who I can continue to be.
Yeah. So remind me, we're going to come back because you said wave to adult court, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But I also want to recognize your comments about, you said after taking so much, you realized that you really wanted to give back. And so that really resonates with me in a conversation I've had with our other panelist, Tracy here. Tracy White is executive director over at the Lincoln Center, and Jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades, whatever you want to be called. She's got her hands in a little bit of everything. Tracy, can you talk to us a little bit about why issues related to criminal justice are important to you, or how you see yourself relating to this conversation?
I certainly can. First of all, it's Tracy Singleton.
Oh my goodness. I don't know.
We work so hard on that.
And it's right there. It's like written right
there. No, I still have problems with it too. I recently just got married. My last name changed. So as LaDrina said, I am executive director of the Lincoln Center, which is a new nonprofit specifically targeting the African American community here in the Quad Cities. And I'm also founder of Well Suited, which is a nonprofit that works directly with African American boys in our community, giving them an opportunity to see themselves different and be in charge of their own narrative, despite what society may say about them, because they are young Black men. But why I'm so closely tied to the criminal justice system and criminal justice itself is because I was part of that system as well. It happened in my younger years, and so this might surprise some people, but yep, I'm a 3-time felon. And I had to learn along the way that I was in charge, of my destiny. And yes, there's systems and, things that kind of hold you down. But at some point in time, I had to be accountable for myself. But what I learned is that we have a very unforgiving community. And so it's hard. But like Jeff said, I felt that I had to give back to the community that I took from. And so I'm probably my hardest critic on myself. And I felt like I also had to prove something to myself, that everything that I did, that I could take those skills and use them for good, and really try to advocate for my community on all levels: criminal justice, social justice, just being a seat at the table.
Yeah. Well, definitely can appreciate, all that both of you are doing in the community, but also understanding that personal connection that you have. I mean, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, as the conversation evolves. Gary Mayfield, you're also one that I consider to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. As are both, all three of you are just deeply entrenched in the community. And so, Gary, talk to us a little bit about your, why this is an important topic to you, and tell us about yourself.
Name's Gary Mayfield. I grew up here in the Quad City. I came from a family of well-rooted individuals who give back to the community. One of the things that got me involved in the criminal justice system is watching a few of my family members have to go through the criminal justice system. How I really got involved with the criminal justice aspect of it is my uncle went to school at Ambrose, and he kind of led me down the path of criminal justice, going to school to do criminal justice. After seeing a few of my family members be incarcerated, kind of things like that. So that's where I kind of picked up and said, I want to do my part and get into the criminal justice system and see how I can make my community better.
So you said you want to get in the criminal justice system on the other side, right? You're like, I want to be in it, but like not in it, right?
Not in. I want to put my hands on how to keep them out of the criminal justice system. That way.
Yeah. So you make a really good point. Gary and I go back to, we both worked at JB Young, gosh, probably 10 or 12 years ago now. You remember when them kids stole my car up at Central too? So Gary and I go way back, and the reason I bring that up is because all too often, you know, as you said, you want to get in the criminal justice system and like really better like understand what's going on. You know, as an educator, we both worked at JB Young. I chose to be at that school. I chose to be at that location to have an impact. And the reason that's important and connected to this conversation is because the environment, right?
Yep.
The environment can be a huge factor in what leads to people being justice impacted. And so the student population that we served at JB Young, you know, a lot of kids in poverty, a lot of minority students, comparatively speaking, when you look at across the district. And so, you know, a lot of times we knew either families that had been, you know, the kids were there, or the parents had been incarcerated or were currently incarcerated. There's just like a lot of environmental factors. And so as you're talking about wanting to impact the system, you know, I see you volunteering in the community. You do a lot with youth sports. And each of you have talked a little bit about how you want to give back to your community. Outside of the giving back to the community, I want to talk a little bit about representation, right? And what we see in this area as it relates to the criminal justice system and the Black representation in Iowa and beyond the area. So can you tell me a little bit about what are some things that you attribute to maybe why there's disproportionality in representation in the criminal justice system, specifically here in Iowa? Tracy, I'll kick that over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it all comes down to resources and what's not available to the African American community as it relates to income, education, health. All those play factors in how you succeed or don't succeed. I grew up middle class. I will say that it wasn't until I, left the home and I had a baby and I was just like, okay, they were like, raise your child. And I'm like, how, like I had no type of skills, and so I did what I thought was the only choice I had to do. And, wrote some checks on bank accounts that I didn't have any money in. But once you're in the system, it's hard to get out the system. And that goes to like when you're on parole, probation, whatever it is. I think that it's a lack of resources. It's a lack of empathy. I think a lot of people feel like, well, you got yourself in this situation. You got to get yourself out of it. And really, that's how I felt. I didn't feel like there was anyone who understood that, man, I'm just trying to keep a roof over our head, food in the mouth, gas and lights on, or a way to work. I didn't feel like at that time anyway, and things have changed over the years. Not a lot, but things have changed over the years. But at that time, so we're talking late 80s, early 90s, there weren't a lot of resources out here or anything that I knew about that could help me. Now, then once you're there, obviously there's programming and stuff like that, but then they put you right back into the same situation with no resources, and no help, especially on the women's side. They for me, I had family who had not given up on me yet. They knew that I could do better, so they didn't give up on me. But I've seen women go back 6, 7, 8 times because there's just no resources out here. There's no family support. And I hate to think that people don't care. I really hate to think that, but the system is not set up for us to succeed. And that's just how, I see it. That's my perception. So until there's a strong support system out here, I think that you're always going to have these issues of disproportionality when it comes to Blacks and incarceration. But it all goes back to, there's layers of reasons why. It's not just because we committed a crime.
Right. So when you're saying us, you said the system is designed for us to fail, or is not set up for us to succeed. Who's the us?
Us, African Americans, Black people.
Okay. Okay, I'm making sure that I'm clear. I'm clear on what it could be. Us Black folks, it could be us returning citizens. Like, I want to make sure that we both are talking about the same thing. That's what I heard, but I just want to, make sure I reiterate that. You referred to, recidivism. And Jeff, you also talked a little bit about that. You talked about some environmental factors and not having access to resources as well. But I guess I want to get an idea from you, Jeff. You talked about recidivism as well. I hear people say, all these kids are doing this, that, and the other, or they're committing these crimes because there's no consequences. Obviously, you both have had consequences for different actions that you've taken, right? And so, again, going back to my original comments, like incarceration, like punishment is a consequence. That's not justice, right? Like, so can you just shed some light for me, Jeff, on like, what do you think those factors that are contributing to recidivism and disproportionality?
Right. I think that's a really great question. And before I even go into that, let me just say that for Black people that live in Iowa, we make up about 4% of the population, but yet we are 1 out of 4 people that are actually put into the criminal justice system. So, and that's actually that was according to the census and statistics from some years ago. So it's only gotten worse since then. So on top of that, I want to say that there's absolutely no way in the world that we're going to arrest our way out of this situation. What we need to do is we need to be able to address the factors that lead to juveniles committing crimes, that leads to juveniles doing things that aren't the most responsible. And in my own experience of being one of those juveniles and then working in the juvenile justice system, and then at some point in time, volunteering and working with the families of those who are kids are in the system, I can say that the idea that that these kids don't get punishment is ridiculous. They do get punishment, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of these kids are dealing with adverse childhood events or high what we call ACE scores. So what that means is that you telling them, hey, we're going to take this from you, we're going to do this to you, is just basically at some point in time, they're thinking, well, it doesn't really matter. I can't see what's happening next week, let alone, what you're saying you're gonna do to me in 2 months. So there isn't that set or that idea of that this is going to motivate me to stop doing what I'm doing until we go in and actually start working with those kids and their families. And so the leading cause that I see is the fact that from the beginning of these kids getting in trouble in school, and then also when they do get arrested, there really isn't anything available for them right now. I mean, they get arrested, and they get released, not because people want to go soft on crime, but because of the fact of the matter is that there's nothing available for them in the community. We don't encourage community members to get involved. We don't help and support community programming. And as a result, we have programming after programming losing funding. So right now, if a kid gets in trouble 2 or 3 times, there's really not much you can do for that child other than remove them from the community. And when you remove them from the community, they no longer feel like that's a part of their experience. So I can tell you as a juvenile who was out committing crimes and doing this and doing that, when you feel like that person in the neighborhood, then you're less likely to take from that person. When you feel like, this is something that I can do, but when you say, but hold up, I'm going to end up seeing this person tomorrow, or this person actually helped me out, it's much harder to do that. So in one of the programs that I ran, which was community-based and dealt with kids who are actually the same kids that are out here now that are stealing cars and so forth. For those particular kids, what we did with them is we actually took the time to put them into the community for different things such as cleaning up, just interacting, and just talking, and so they can get to know the people that at some point in time they may have offended against and taken from them. And as a result, they no longer feel that. So we got to actually connect them, bridge them back to the community, and actually encourage people to get them involved into the different things that are available for them out here. So hopefully that answered that.
Yeah, I mean, I can recall, when we were in a situation, especially because my husband worked at JB too, and we were in the neighborhood, we lived in the neighborhood and everything like that. And when my car got stolen, Gary, remember when my car got stolen and the kids in the neighborhood found my car? Like, they were like, oh man, come on, that was Mr. Wilson's wife, or that kind of thing. And so that, connect with that, because the kids, they had a lot of respect for the people they knew and felt connected to. And not just because somebody was giving them something, right? Like, I don't feel like the kids felt like they were owed something, but there was an appreciation for the fact that there was time spent and invested. Gary, I want to make sure I pull you in, because I know we've talked about different experiences. Specifically, I mean, I don't know how we're end up focused on youth, but in this particular situation, when we were working in the schools, and Tracy, you alluded to this, when people are messing up in school, or I'm sorry, Jeff, I think it was you, we could tell the kids in what track they were on. Like, it wasn't 100%, but like, you could say, okay, if something doesn't change here, like there's a critical point, 7th and 8th grade, where we could look at a kid's situation and combine that with some of the behaviors that they were showing, and we could say, okay, this will be what will happen by 19. This kid will have this outcome, right? And so you pour into them, you try to, but you only get so much time with them at the school. So Gary, can you talk to me a little bit about like the education perspective? I know you work down at JDC now, but you have a lot of background in security in schools. And so can you talk to us a little bit about what role that might play in the disproportionality?
That's a great question. I was on a panel a few weeks ago, and we talked about a lot of it has to do with building relationships with those youth. If you can build a relationship with those kids that are out here doing crimes, that is one of my pet peeves of trying to help. If I can make a connection, that's where I find it, is building those relationships. Those kids come back and they can come and talk to me if they have a problem. That in the educational aspect of it, that is what we're missing, is a lot of our educational administrators and that aspect of it, they don't truly deal with that kid and trying to build that relationship. What is it I want? So saying that, a lot of our kids make those decisions to get that attention, to try to get someone to pull them in and get close to them, get to know them. Like you said, the ones that took your car, the kids who you who knew you and trusted you, went out and found your car. So it's in our environment right now, it's a good thing that I still live in that neighborhood where those kids are out taking stuff. They can come to me. Well, if you go to an educator or some, most of those don't live in that neighborhood. So that would be my aspect or overlook of it.
So we talked a little bit about not arresting ourselves out of the situation. The United States has 25% of the world's incarcerated population. We have 330 million people in the United States, and we have 25% of the world's incarcerated people. I think just that statistic alone lets you know, putting people in a cell is not necessarily going to fix things, right? But yet and still we keep doing it. So as I look at the criminal justice system, and it's a vast network of agencies, right? You've got the judicial system, corrections, probation, policing, all of these different aspects of criminal justice. And Jeff, I heard you say that you spent did you say 4 years or 2 years in solitary confinement?
4 years in solitary confinement.
That is mind blowing to me. I mean, I'm just thinking, about like COVID when quarantine started and just being quarantined in my house. So I can't even imagine, and even for like 2 months, it felt like a lot. So I can't even begin to wrap my mind around what that experience would be like. But I think about all these different areas, right, that are where we see disparities. And I want to know from your guys' perspective, where's the biggest issue? Is it in parole and probation? Is it in policing? You know, where would you start if you were looking at trying to improve the equity gaps? Where would you start with reform? Jeff?
You know, to answer this, I want to just put this in perspective, right? So I remember when I was a youngster, I first went to court, and I was, I would say like 12 years old. And when I went to court, I remember that I was arrested by a white police officer. And then at some point in time, I went to court. The bailiff was white. The people in the court was white. The prosecuting attorney or district attorney was white. The judge was white. The lady that was typing everything out in the courtroom, she was white. And the only people that were black was myself and my mother. And so at that point in time, I knew and I felt that whatever was going on, it was going to get worse. That somebody in there at some point in time wasn't going to be able to understand and know and see things from my perspective. While I couldn't verbalize it, I felt it. And so what I'd say is, when you look at that, every juncture and every point where we touch down, there is a point where there's an ability to change. And so while I think about probation officers, parole officers being minorities or being black, being women that are black, and I think about judges being more being black, and I think about all the different people that are part of that huge mechanism. But at the end of the day, the police officers are enforcing policy. The judges are enforcing laws. The district attorneys are pursuing to the extent of the law that's there. Where we actually need to make the biggest, the most impact is through creating that law, through policy changes at the voting booth, at representation in our political offices and that's at the local, that's at the city, state, and federal level, where these laws are actually created, these committees are actually established. That's what actually is going to be able to allow us to create the change that's needed. Because until then, it's great. For example, one of the things that I used to do, I used to run a residential treatment facility for kids. And I remember most of the kids we got were minorities. And I remember going to interview a kid that was going to go to my facility. And he's in this program, and I'm looking at bringing him in, and I'm having a conversation with him. He says, "Hold up." He says, you're the supervisor? I said, "Yeah." He said, and he's black. And he just smiles from ear to ear, right? And he feels as though now he can actually understand and talk and communicate, you know? And so it was, and he was only 12. And so at that juncture, there was only so much I could do, right? But yet if other things were set up and other laws and policies were set up, there could have been so much more that I could have done. So we need to be able to understand that in order to make change, we got to create change. And in order to create change, we got to influence these laws and policies. We can actually go and we can have more people who look like us getting involved in these different parts of the system, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but we got to actually impact the way that these laws are being established. And so, you know, that is honestly where we can make the biggest impact. Because, you know, for example, my cousin, Gary's uncle, you know, he went out and we were able to find out that racial profiling was happening in the Quad Cities. You know, we saw this. It was established. It was a 2-3 year study. It was there. But until the policies actually reflect the data that 1 in 4 Black people are incarcerated in Iowa, that we only make up 4% of the population, but we make up the 25% of that, that we are disproportionately being weighed to adult court as juveniles. We are looked at as Black children more older than what we really are. So we got to actually reflect these things that create the disproportionate results, which is by getting them involved.
So, Jeff, are you saying that Black youth, statistically are waived to adult court more frequently than other racial and ethnic groups?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things that is all looked at is the disproportionate minority community committee, which actually studies that across the United States, but in particular in Iowa. And so what was able to be found is that we look scarier, we look more dangerous, we look older, we look more intimidating, so we're more likely to be involved into being waived to adult court. When I went to prison, I had my 18th birthday in solitary confinement at the Fort Madison, Iowa State Penitentiary that was there at the time. Everyone that came in that was being waived to adult court, and this is my own personal experience, after me were Black youth across the state of Iowa. And lastly, I'll say is that there's something to the idea that, and when you're in prison, we call Iowa truly the Institute of White America, which means that it has embodied the element of institutional racism, where prisons are located in rural white areas. This is truly their livelihood. And the farmer who's today can be sanctioned by the state of Iowa to kill and maim and whatever, with total immunity. So yeah, I think that when you look at people who look like me when we're younger, we look more dangerous. And as a result, and we don't have the ability to advocate for ourselves. So we end up being waived to adult court. Absolutely.
You've said so many things that are so important. I mean, you're touching on implicit bias because you're being perceived to be something that, maybe you're not. There's just so many different directions we could go with that. But I think it's important that people hear it, not just from a statistical perspective, but from the actually like taking a minute and just walking in your shoes. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us. Tracy, I know you've talked about reentry and how there aren't resources available. So I'm not trying to bait you into an answer in terms of where you would start, but I do want you to share both where you think the changes, systemic change needs to occur, but also could you talk to us a little bit about some of those requirements that are barriers when you are reentering? I know you talked about a driver's license and job requirements and those. Can you talk to us a little bit about that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I'm also just a personal experience and where I think changes could happen. And I'm definitely going to say the court system, because kind of that's where it all begins. And that's where there is an absolute chance to do something different versus doing what you just always do. And I remember one time I was on parole and I had missed 2 appointments. I didn't have a car. And so I had missed 2 appointments, and my parole officer, she was just something else. So I already knew she was going to put a warrant out for my arrest because I had missed 2 appointments. And I got picked up. It was like, maybe 2 or 3 months after that. And had to, sat in jail waiting for what are they called? Public defender to come and talk to me. No one came and talked to me until I was supposed to go in front of the judge. And then he was like, well, they agreed to, you just do a year and be done with it. I said, a year? I said, for missing some appointments? He's like, well, that's what they offered. And I was like, I'm not going to sign that. And so we go in front of the judge, and prosecuting attorney's like, well, they didn't even say what was wrong. They just said she violated her parole, so we offer her a year. I said, Judge, can I say something? My lawyer was trying to keep me quiet. And I said, no, Judge, can I say something? And the judge said, yeah. And I said, I just missed some appointments. I don't think I need to go do a year. And he said, oh, you didn't commit another crime? I said, no, I just missed 2 appointments. So he starts looking through paperwork, and he was like, well, do you got time to sit in jail over the weekend? And I said, yeah. And he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna give you 3 days, and then you can just be done with everything. And I said, okay, sign the paperwork. So I'm an advocate for myself. I have always been an advocate for myself. And right is right and wrong is wrong. And if I'm wrong, I have no problem admitting I was wrong. But I didn't feel like I needed to go back for a whole year because I missed a couple of appointments. And had I not spoke up for myself, how many people ended up signing that plea and went back for a whole year for something that they didn't deserve to go back for a whole year for? So I truly believe that change can start in the court system. But I do agree with Jeff where it comes to policy, procedure, and practice. Those have to change. As far as recidivism goes, like, once again, it's just a lack of
Can I just say
resources.
one thing, Tracy?
Yeah.
Can you add this to the list of questions I hope I'm never asked? Do you have time to sit in jail this weekend?
But versus going for a whole year, yeah, I got time this weekend.
Well, I mean, I'm glad he asked you that question, but at the same time, just adding that to the list of questions I hope.
Right? Yep, I can do this weekend. I think it was a holiday weekend too, so I had to stay until Monday, but it was better than going to prison for a whole year. So, but nonetheless, there are so many barriers. And once again, I can only speak from the perspective of being a woman and being a mom, because I had all my children. And fortunately for me, I had family who could look after my children, while I was gone. But believe me, they couldn't wait for me to get home. And once again, for me, I had resources. I mean, I had work history, I had education, I had family support. So I didn't have a lot of those barriers that some women face when they come out, when whoever was taking care of their kids were like, oh, good, you're home, here are your kids. And then once again, those things that were problems, because believe me, not too many people are out here doing crimes because they just want to commit crimes. There's a reason behind it. They're trying to find a way, and this was the only way that they figured out how to take care of a situation. But I know for me personally, like, I couldn't get a driver's license because they said I couldn't, not because I couldn't. So for a whole year, I had to figure out how to get myself around and my 4 kids around, because they said I couldn't get a driver's license. And then once I was able to get the driver's license, I was okay. But taking buses, walking, relying, like, people are only going to help. People will help, but there's a limit to their help, and so then you don't want to force people into a situation where they don't really want to help, but, they don't want to tell you no, but then you have to deal with, attitudes or, whatever it is. But I think for me personally, the biggest barrier has been that felony behind my name, because you got to check the box. And then we're a small community, so everyone kind of knows, what's going on. And so for me, overcoming that has probably been the hardest thing for me personally. And mine, like I said, this was the late 80s, early 90s. So it ain't like this just happened. It's been a while, and it's still things I have to deal with to this day. My past will always be brought up in situations that it has no business being brought up, but like, oh, did you know this, and it's been about 4 or 5 years ago, but I finally decided to share my story. I will say that I kept my past kept me from doing a lot of things, because I was just so nervous and so worried that someone would be like, oh, hey, did you know this about her? Did you hear this about Tracy? And so I finally shared my story at the risk of knowing that this may ruin some relationships, personal relationships and business relationships. But I was fortunate enough that I was surrounded by a group of people who didn't judge me, But I think for anyone that has been in the system, whether it was as a juvenile or whether it was as an adult, you have that stain, and it's just something that's always going to be with you. I will say, and to this day, that had I not went through what I went through, I wouldn't be the person I am today. So that is part of who I am. I'm not proud of it, but at the time I did what I felt the only chance that I think that I could do to take care of my children, and so it's still a thing for me. I still feel a lot of guilt behind it. But at the same time, it's what motivates me as well to do the work that I do in the community and try to make everyone, regardless of what your background is, feel like they deserve to be a part of this community.
Well, you make a really good point. The reality of it is, regardless of whether if you're re-entering or if you are been here the whole time and you haven't been a part of the criminal justice system, you are part of the community. Mm-hmm. Like, even if people try to ostracize you, you're still here, right? And you're still part of that community. So either it's going to be a burden on the system because people don't feel like they can live there to their fullest potential, whether that means recidivism or whether that means maybe not getting gainful employment or pursuing employment opportunities because they have these barriers. It's still going to impact the system, right? The system meaning the community. And so that's why this has been so like a really important conversation for me, is because we can't afford to have a large numbers of people on the margins and on the fringes, right? Like there's so much potential that's right here in this community. And so again, just going back to justice, what is it? Is justice punishment, or is justice redemption? Right?
At least
Because
a chance for redemption.
right. And not just from a employment perspective, but like from a reputation, like give people a chance to show that they can do better, because more than likely they can. They just need an environment that's going to be ripe for them to be able to, and I think you guys are evidence of that. Gary, from your perspective, if you were going to look at reform, where would you start?
I would start it with the education of our kids. I do not feel that our kids get an adequate education. A lot of the educational system is scared of our kids. They're scared of the potential that our kids can do better and be stronger. So when I go into a classroom and I don't see somebody that looks like me, our kids are being educated by people who aren't even from their community, who aren't like them. They don't go home to the same trials and tribulations as our kids, or those kids that are from the inner city. We don't know. They don't know what that kid did with last night. If that kid had a good hot meal, or if that kid was able to take a shower, if that kid's parents were home or not at home. Has that kid been up all night? A lot of it has to do with educating our kids.
I couldn't agree more. There's a quote by Frederick Douglass that I really try to keep at the forefront of my mind. I think it's I hope I don't butcher this, but it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Did I get that right, guys?
Yes.
Okay. And that's really something that I've tried to ascribe to, is recognizing that, we need to pour into our children. And by our children, I don't mean my babies at home, although charity begins at home. I mean that, Gary, if you see my kid doing something they're not supposed to be doing, and you need to set them straight, and you need to give me a call so I can reinforce that at home, absolutely. And your wife has called me before, right? And the same thing with, if I see someone else's child, if there's something that I have to give to help them understand the world better, certainly we should be giving that, right? Just as a basic function of being a good person and being a good quad citizen, but just caring for our youth, And so I really appreciate that perspective. And there's definitely, outside of it, of how it feels, I mean, there's data that shows there is a school to prison pipeline, right? There are prisons that are built based on third grade reading levels, right? That's the rate at which prisons are built in this country. And so really examining what that means, and knowing that there's, maybe the schools aren't the cause, but there's certainly a correlation. And so I think that can't be understated. So Tracy, you mentioned that you couldn't get a driver's license, and you talked about maybe missing a couple of appointments. I guess those are considered like technical violation. That would be a technical violation. I know there's some legislation in Iowa right now that's looking at changing some of the parameters around technical violations. It doesn't look like it's going to pass at this particular point. But when you said that you couldn't get a driver's license, is that because of like fines or fee? Like, why were you not permitted to get a driver's license? And Jeff, did you have a similar situation?
Mine was because of fines, because I was in prison, so I couldn't pay my fines. So when I got out, I had to pay those fines off. I was on like a payment plan, so I had to wait a year before I got my license.
Okay, Jeff, how about you?
No, I didn't run into that. I didn't even know how to get my driver's license because I didn't have one before I went in. Because I went in before I actually before I got my license. But I can tell you that just like with trying to figure out whether or not felons could vote, if we could vote, that was a whole other thing in itself. I'm 45. First time I voted was last year, because there was a thing where the information is disinformation, because you don't know if you can. If you do and you're wrong, you can get a crime. You can get charged with that. So yeah, it was just like a whole lot of go this way, but don't go that way. It was like I was living in Alice in Wonderland. Nothing meant what it said. And if you go over here and you do this, you're liable to get into trouble. So it's a lot of disinformation, and you're not really prepped. And I think Tracy can attest to that for when you get out and being able to get your social security card, driver license, and all those other standard things that you may need just to live as a citizen,
So I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But are you saying, do you feel like the penal system, that corrections prepares people for reentry?
Oh no, absolutely not. And I've said this before, and I remember saying this a while ago, but the rehabilitation system isn't the rehabilitation system, because that means, re means to go back, and most of us haven't been habilitated to begin with. So it's like it's about being able to be transformational. And so when you're transformational, that means you start from square one. So in all honesty, when I got out, it was like 3 months beforehand. I don't know what they did at, with you, Tracy, but 3 or 4 months beforehand, they like put us through a class that said, hey, be prepared for this, be prepared for that. See you later on, you got a parole, And there was nothing that actually set you up for success. And you get out and you got to get a job. You have to do this, you have to do that. But nothing actually sets you up for success, at least back then. And as of I know right now, there isn't a lot of things out there from within the Iowa Department of Corrections.
So you go to prison, you spend years in prison, and at no point, what services are, I'm going to sound really naive when I ask this question, but I'm asking it genuinely. What is available to you? Like, are there optional programs that maybe you just didn't take advantage of? Or, I know there are college and prison programs at some prisons and that type of thing, but college is different than like life skills, right? So like, Jeff, you're making a face at me now.
Well, I say that, because in Iowa, with regards to college, people hear about that. That's not a reality. I'm just going to be honest with you. Most people, it just doesn't work like that. But I understand a lot of people think that, and I didn't mean to make a face at you, but I was thinking, and my face betrayed what my thoughts were, which is that. So I went in when I was 17. All right. And at the end of the day, the only thing I was eligible for was getting my GED, which I ended up getting when I was around 18, actually. So other than that, because remember, keep this in mind, these prisons are placed in, like I had mentioned, rural white areas. So that means that when you come in and you're from cities that they may not be used to you, everything is interpreted as aggression and violence. And so what you have then is you have a situation where you may be involved in altercations with these people who may not have never ever interacted with anyone that looked like you before, other than through their job as working as a correctional officer. So that means that you'll spend a lot of time in the administrative segregation or the whole solitary confinement, because you'll have a lot of struggles. And so as a result, for me, because I spent so much time in solitary confinement, there's nothing available. Now, when you go to a minimum facility, there may be more. But for me, there was nothing available other than me just taking the time to learn the law, to just teach myself and teach myself about this and about that. Other than that, there's really nothing that was available at that time. I literally left, and all my education that I had got at that point was for me desiring to want to change, to do different, and educate myself so I can go in better, so I can leave better than when I went in. So I was determined not to go back. That's the only reason why I left more educated.
So Tracy, how about for you? Were there programs or services or?
So in Iowa, anyway, you go through, I forgot what it's called or where it's at. It's before you go to prison, though. in Iowa City, like right outside Iowa City. It's like a classification center. And so there they will take you through a series of tests to see what type of services you could benefit from, or what type of classes you could benefit from. And a lot of times it was just that. It's like their GED, or maybe a parenting class, or, you know, something like that. But when it came time to leave, you know, whatever money you had, they gave that to you. And if you didn't have no one coming to get you, they gave you a bus ticket, and that was it. You were home. And even, you know, here, the last time I went, I had to go to the work release system before I could come home. And even there, you know, it's like, you got to find a job, you got to find a way to get back and forth to that job, and you got to pay bills. And you got not just whatever bills you got to pay them too, you know. So I was really, once again, I was fortunate that I had family support, that I had a job I could go back to, that I had money saved, you know. So I didn't have it as hard as some other women, but I have seen women who just absolutely have no resources, no way. They've never worked, so no way to earn money. If they were receiving like some type of state aid or whatever, whoever's keeping their kids is now getting that check. And so, you know, there's no income. It's hard. It really is hard. Even in the best circumstances, as with me, like I said, I have family support and everything. It's still hard. Just to know, for one, that you feel like people are always judging you. So it doesn't matter, you know, that saying, like, you can do all the good in the world, but they're still going to remember that one bad thing, you know. And so trying to overcome that, like, not even financially, emotionally and mentally, trying to re-enter society as just a normal person, it's very hard to do. So, and I don't know if there's anything that can help you, you know, you with that, other than knowing that you have a community that is understanding, you know, and will give you those chances to just be a good person. Because sometimes that's all people need. These kids, you know, I have a mentoring program. So I know that a lot of times the kids just need to know that someone cares. I know for me, it was my church. I will say that. For me, it was my church, and that they welcomed me back, offered resources and support, and helped me establish faith. And faith really, at the end of the day, that's what ends up helping you get through. You know, knowing that you have a higher power, that at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. But some people, that's hard to get. It's hard to get to that. So I think society as a whole has to change the narrative on how you deal with people who are coming back.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I shared, you know, my story, because I can easily see how, when you're a victim, how somebody else's punishment can become really important to you. Like I've lived that, right? You know, and that's why when you say, like, the society has to have a different perspective, it's going to take all of us making some changes, and thinking outside of ourselves and thinking outside of that experience or that moment. It's bigger than just me or you or any of us here, right? It's our community. Mm-hmm. Now we are running a little low on time here. This conversation has really flowed and gone quickly as far as I'm concerned. But Gary, I'm going to ask each of you to share with me from your perspective, before we wrap things up. Is there any one particular concept that you know of that's happening here locally, or even more regionally, that is a really innovative concept that is having a positive impact on the criminal justice system? Gary, are you aware of anything that's going on currently that you share with us, or even an idea that you have that you want to share?
No, I don't have one. I think Tracy said it earlier. Our youth need those mentors, and I think she runs a program that mentors our youth. A lot of our youth are looking for attention. And how they get their attention is negative right now. So can we give them that good good attention by having those mentors, having people like Tracy and Jeff who have been through the judicial system, giving them that feedback to keep them away from it, or try to keep them away from it. Me, unfortunately, I've never been in that situation, so I don't have those stories. The closest thing for me was watching siblings have to go through it. But I've never really dealt with that aspect of it. They go do their time, and that's on them. It has nothing to do with me. But listening to Tracy and listening to Jeff, I think as a community, we have to do a better job of trying to find those things to help. Like she said, when she got out, she don't teach you how to go get a job or how to make that money that you need to make. They want you to stay out of trouble. They don't want you in the system, but they don't give you the tools. So how can we as a community give those folks that come back to us that chance to better themselves and make things right?
Definitely. So really finding the communities to invest in and have a stake in what our reentry processes look like. That's what I hear you saying. Any other creative like solutions or concepts that are currently, in the works, or that you've thought of that you want to share as a solution to, ending some of this disproportionality?
Actually, one of the things that I do is I'm on the board of the Safer Foundation, which is based out of Chicago, but here locally. And a lot of people who are returning citizens actually went there to to get jobs once they got out, because they really work well with that. So that's one part of that. But one of the things I would also say about that organization, they work with the Department of Justice. They actually moved down to the halfway house, which is in Davenport, part of their offices, because they've created a mentoring program for people getting out. So then that way they've connected with people who are formerly incarcerated, returning citizens, with people who are just getting out. So we can sort of be that person that sort of teaches them ropes, and also gives them that information that Tracy and I talked about that we didn't get, So they have a mentoring program going on right now. They've had one before that, and they just seem to be on the cutting edge of being able to create those unique solutions for those situations. And I wouldn't just be on any board. Let me say that, unless I believe in the mission. And I watched the mission. It was actually the mission when through that organization that I ran a program with the community kids. So yeah, that is one thing that's going on. It doesn't have to be people that are formerly incarcerated either. It could be anybody. And just someone that people getting out they can connect with and say, hey, I got a support from someone who's a little pro-social, who's going to tell me when I'm doing wrong, and also let me know when I'm doing right. So, yeah.
So Jeff, what I'm going to do when we get done with the conversation, either tonight or tomorrow, I'm going to go into the comments, because I know this will sit out on the internet probably forever, I guess. But I want to make sure that resource is available to the people who do choose to listen to this conversation, so that if they want to connect with the Safer Foundation, if they want to be part of the solution, it'll be in the comments for people to be able to go and see, like, how do I get plugged in to be of support? So I appreciate you sharing that resource. Tracy, before we wrap up, I have two things that I wanted to get from you. One was the innovative solutions. I would consider your programs that you offer as one of those. But also, there was a specific question that I wanted to ask you, if there was any one particular thing that you wanted to share that you think listeners would find surprising as it relates to the criminal justice system. So I'm leaving you with two things.
No problem. As far as innovative solutions, Well Suited was started 6 years ago. And I always say that's, for me, it's long-term. Like, I won't know if it was a success until these boys are men, who are working and who are raising their children. But I'm seeing small wins, right? I'm seeing the boys that started 6 years ago as freshmen in high school now, who are leaders in the school and leaders on their team, and they're working, they're getting their little first jobs at 14, 15 years old, and I'm writing the references for them. So we're seeing the results from Well Suited starting to come to fruition. So that just goes to show me it's just attention, it's just interaction, it's just having a male in their lives. 90% of the boys that are Well Suited are being raised in a single mother home, and they just want to be around the men. I watch them, like it's like night and day. When the men walk into the room, how they sit up, how they, yes sir, and I'm Tracy, I'm 5'3", I have a very loud voice, so sometimes I might lose control in a group with 25 boys, but when the men walk in the room, it's a totally different story. So I think it's those type of things, and we're organic. Like, I'm not like matching them, like trying to find who likes what or whatever. It's an organic thing, and it just happens, and it's just because men just want to be around. We've actually are in the talks of some type of pilot program with Boys and Girls Club with the boys, and so I think we might start seeing some results from that. So I would say it's innovative. There's also a conversation going around about a new concept called peace hubs. And so it's just creating safe spaces for kids. Like Gary was saying, we don't know what these kids go through. I have boys that are in my program that have had to deal with things that grown men couldn't deal with. And they're 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and so to create these safe spaces for them where they're talking to people who look like them, where they're able to talk about what they want to talk about without fear of people judging them. So that's one of the things that we're looking at for the Lincoln Center. Is creating these peace hubs, and we're right in that neighborhood. So I think that this is a good place for it. So we'll see if that works. And I kind of have shared it, that I think what most people don't realize is that there, especially for women, there's just no support system. And so I am one of those people that if I don't see it, then I'm going to try to figure out a way to make something happen, But I'm glad to know about the Safer Foundation. Like, I've heard of the Safer Foundation, but I didn't quite know exactly what they did. And I've shared this with LaDrina, that because I, carry shame with my past, I haven't always felt that I could go back and help, I just felt like I just had to do what I had to do for me and my family. But I think at some point we all have to go back and help in whatever way we can, because you just never know what one word or one gesture might do for that next person. So.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I just want you all to know that, we're trying to change the narrative around the criminal justice issues, particularly returning citizens, but that the phrase that has been used in recent years is justice impacted, right? And that could be people who are victims, and that could be people who were offenders. But for me, I think the most important piece is realizing that we are all justice impacted. If you have not been a victim, if you have not committed a crime, all that's still happening here in our backyards. We are all justice impacted, and we have to decide what role we want to play in this community as it relates to these issues. And for too many years, our communities have focused on making sure we don't speak about these things because we don't want our names or our brand or our social capital associated with controversial issues or controversial topics or controversial people. And that has to stop, because we all have an uncle, a brother, a mother, a cousin who has been in the system, because we are the largest incarcerating country in the world. So it's everybody's issue. right? And so a lot of times family members are pushed to the side, or only a handful of folks deal with folks who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated. And I'm not saying we wear that with a badge of honor, but what I am saying is that we honor that they're part of our community. And we cannot treat people as though they are the sum of their worst transaction. We owe it to our community to do better. We owe it to just humanizing people who have been through experiences and made bad choices. And at the end of the day, those folks who have gone through our criminal justice system are supposed to have paid their debt. And we need to count it all good and invite them back into a community where they can have success. Because we all lose if those who are justice impacted don't have access to success. And it's our role to help them find self-determination. And so I appreciate the conversation that we've had tonight, from each of you sharing your various perspectives and experiences, from the education system to being in the system, and also impacting change at the local level. Each of you brings a very interesting perspective and knowledge base that has been enlightening to me, even just in the short time that we've had together. And so hopefully those folks that have listening have found this to be a worthwhile conversation. So until we meet again, I just want to say thank you again so much for your time. And for the listeners, we will see you in about a month. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Hidden Conversations. The Hidden Conversations project is coordinated by Dr. LaDrina Wilson, Tracy Singleton, Dr. Lauren Hammond Ford, Ryan Sadler, and me, Jared Johnson. We would also like to thank everyone on the Intelligent Conversations Planning Committee and on WVIK's Community Advisory Board for their support and guidance. Support for tonight's conversation comes from a Healing Illinois grant from the Chicago Community Trust, as well as a United for Equity grant from United Way Quad Cities. And mark your calendars for March 10th, 2022, when Michelle Norris, longtime host of NPR's All Things Considered, Washington Post contributor, and author of The Grace of Silence, will keynote our live Intelligent Conversation event, made possible by the Joyce and Tony Singh Family Foundation.